Picture this. The grand hall of the Bangkok International Debate Open is buzzing. On one side of the stage sits Niran, Thailand's undefeated debate star. They call him the Bulldozer, and for good reason. He doesn't just beat his opponents, he demolishes them, leaving a trail of shattered arguments in his wake. On the other side, there's Paulo, a 28-year-old literature teacher from the Philippines. He's a last-minute replacement, a total unknown. He has the gentle look of a man who discusses poetry for a living, not someone who engages in rhetorical combat. Niran barely gives him a second glance. The champion, like everyone else in the room, is expecting a quick and brutal finish. But what they got instead was a masterclass in intellectual dominance, just not from the person they expected. This story isn't just about winning a debate. It's about a collision of two completely different philosophies of argument and a powerful lesson in where the true strength of an idea really comes from. To really get the shock of what happened, you have to understand who Niran was. He wasn't just a champion, he was a phenomenon. His style was pure spectacle, and his signature move was a tactic called the Gish Gallop. It's a strategy where you overwhelm your opponent with a rapid-fire barrage of arguments, questions, and so-called facts, whether they're accurate or not. The sheer volume makes it impossible to answer everything, making your opponent look like they're unprepared or dodging the questions. Niran was a master of this. He'd stand there, radiating confidence, and unleash a torrent of statistics and obscure references. It was designed to intimidate, to create the illusion of being intellectually untouchable. Most debaters caught in this storm would get flustered. They'd try to rebut one point, and Niran would pivot to three more, accusing them of ignoring his other irrefutable arguments. It was manufactured chaos, and it worked. When the Gish Gallop wasn't enough, he'd switch to other tactics. He was known for the ad hominem attack, where he'd subtly shift from attacking the argument to attacking the arguer, painting them as naive or misinformed. And he was a surgeon with the straw man fallacy. That's where you misrepresent or oversimplify your opponent's argument into something absurd, and then you tear that absurd version to shreds, acting like you just defeated their actual point. For instance, if someone argued for stricter environmental regulations, Niran might shoot back, "So you want to shut down all our factories and send us back to the Stone Age?" Of course, that's not what they said, but it's an easier point to attack. For years, this mix of brute force and trickery was unbeatable. His opponents weren't just out-argued, they were psychologically dismantled on stage. Victory for Niran was about pure dominance. So when he saw a quiet Filipino teacher take the stage, he didn't see a challenger. He saw his next victim. Paulo was, in almost every way, Niran's polar opposite. At 28, he was one of the thousands of overseas Filipino workers, specifically one of the many Filipino teachers whose skills are in demand across Thailand. Filipino educators are often highly regarded for their English skills, strong work ethic, and cultural adaptability. Paulo taught literature at a small private school in Bangkok, where his colleagues knew him as a teacher dedicated to helping his students find their own voice. But his passion wasn't just for books, it was for the ideas inside them. Paulo was a believer in critical pedagogy, a philosophy most famously championed by the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire. This isn't just a teaching method, it's a way of looking at the world. Freire disliked what he called the banking model of education, where a teacher just deposits information into a student's supposedly empty head. He argued it was dehumanizing and stamped out critical thought. Instead, Freire argued for a problem-posing education built around dialogue where teachers and students learn together. It's all about asking questions, challenging assumptions, and connecting your personal life to bigger social issues. The goal isn't to win an argument, but to reach a deeper understanding, a state Freire called critical consciousness. This philosophy shaped everything about Paulo. He didn't just teach stories, he used them to start conversations. He taught his students to question the narrator, to analyze power dynamics in the plot, and to connect a 400-year-old play to their own lives. His goal was never to give them answers, but to give them the tools to find their own. This style also has echoes in a Filipino tradition of debate called balagtasan, a poetic joust where opponents argue a topic in verse. It's a battle of both wits and artistry. So as Paulo got ready to face Niran, he wasn't planning on fighting fire with fire. His background had armed him with a totally different set of weapons: the power of a good question, the patience for real dialogue, and the belief that the strongest argument isn't the loudest one, but the most understood one. He wasn't there to dominate, he was there to connect, and that was an approach Niran was completely unprepared for. This clash of styles, the aggressive performer versus the quiet educator, is something we see everywhere. Have you ever been in an argument with someone who uses tactics like Niran's? Drop a comment below and tell us how you handled it. And if you're finding this story interesting, make sure you subscribe for more. The topic for the final round was announced. This house believes that artificial intelligence poses a greater threat to humanity than climate change. It was a perfect topic for Niran's style. He went first, launching into a classic Gish gallop. For 10 minutes, he buried the stage in an avalanche of information. He cited dozens of studies, quoted futurists, and painted terrifying scenes of rogue AI, mass unemployment, and autonomous weapons. He used so much jargon and moved so fast, it was almost impossible to follow. The audience was hooked. The message was clear. How could anyone possibly argue against this mountain of evidence? Then, it was Paulo's turn. The hall went quiet. Everyone leaned in, expecting him to be completely overwhelmed. Paulo stood up, took a calm breath, and looked at the judges. He didn't have a stack of notes, just one small card. The previous speaker, Paulo began, his voice steady, has painted a truly frightening picture. A cascade of scenarios so terrifying that the only rational response feels like panic. He paused. But I'm not going to try and address all of those points. To do that would be to play into the storm he has created. Instead, I want to ask one simple question. What is the single foundational assumption that holds all of these terrifying scenarios together? Silence. This was a completely unexpected move. Paulo wasn't playing Niran's game, he was changing the rules. The assumption, Paulo continued, is that AI is an independent actor, a force of nature like a hurricane that will simply happen to us. My opponent's entire case rests on the idea that we will be passive victims, not the active creators and regulators of this technology. He's presented AI as a monster, but he's conveniently left out the one who created it, us. This was Paulo's strategy. Don't get lost in the details. Find the root of the argument and question it. Instead of fighting 100 branches, he went straight for the trunk. He argued that unlike climate change, which is the result of centuries of action and involves planetary systems beyond our total control, AI is a tool being built and shaped by people at every step. He used a simple analogy. We aren't debating if the invention of the hammer was a threat. We're debating what a person might do with it. My opponent spent 10 minutes describing a world full of terrifying nails, but ignored the hand of the carpenter. During cross-examination, Niran tried to pull him back into the chaos. Are you denying the possibility of an intelligence explosion? Have you even read the latest papers on recursive self-improvement? Paulo didn't flinch. To every aggressive question, he'd calmly reply, "That's an interesting hypothetical, but can we go back to the core issue? How does that happen without human decisions being made at every stage?" He refused to take the bait. The more aggressive Niran became, the more he seemed to prove Paulo's point, that the real dangers came from human choices, not the tech itself. The turning point came when a frustrated Niran threw out a blatant straw man. "So, You're saying we should just trust corporations to do the right thing, that there's no danger at all? Paulo paused. With all due respect, he said gently, that is not what I said, and I think you know that. My opponent is trying to debate a fool who sees no danger. I'm not that fool. I'm arguing that the danger of AI is in human hands, which makes it a problem we can solve with regulation and ethics. Climate change, on the other hand, is a runaway train we may no longer be able to stop. That is the greater threat. In that moment, Niran's illusion shattered. The audience saw the tactic for what it was. For the first time, the Bulldozer was on the defensive. Paulo's closing statement was quiet and powerful. He brought it all back to a human level. In the stories we tell, he said, we have always feared our own creations, Frankenstein's monster, the golem. But the lesson of those stories is never about the monster. It's about the creator's arrogance and their failure of empathy. The threat of AI is a story we are writing right now. Climate change is a story whose disastrous final chapter may have already been written. Our house is on fire. Let's not get distracted by the fear of a flood that we still have the power to prevent. When he finished, there was a beat of silence, then an explosion of applause. He hadn't just won the argument, he had elevated it. The judge's decision was unanimous. Paulo, the substitute teacher, was the winner. The shock on Niran's face was obvious. He'd been taken apart, not by a bigger pile of facts, but by a better way of thinking. His every tactic was calmly identified, sidestepped, and exposed. Paulo didn't win by being louder, he won by being clearer. The story of that debate became a quiet legend in the circuit. It's a powerful reminder that an argument doesn't have to be warfare. It can be a process of discovery. Niran's style is all too common today. We see it online and in politics all the time. Arguments meant to confuse and intimidate, not to clarify. Paulo's victory shows us a different way. It shows that calm, structured thinking can be more powerful than aggressive rhetoric. You don't have to answer every bad faith question to win. Sometimes the best move is to refuse to engage the chaos, step back, and focus on what truly matters. It's a lesson straight from his life as a teacher. Real persuasion happens through dialogue, not domination. The techniques Paulo used, finding the core assumption, refusing to be baited, and calling out fallacies, are skills anyone can learn. We're actually putting together a follow-up video, breaking these down for you to use in your own life. If that sounds useful, hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. In a world that often rewards the loudest voice, Paulo's victory is a reminder that clarity cuts through noise. His quiet, methodical approach, born from a love of literature and a belief in dialogue, proved that the goal of an argument shouldn't be to build a wall of facts so high no one can scale it, but to build a bridge of understanding that everyone can cross. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to shout, but to ask a simple question.